Derek here from Civic Punks. I'm here at GovInsider's Festival of Innovation in Singapore, and I am hugely honored to have two quite prestigious guests. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, Shareef from the Maldives. My latest stint with government, I was a Minister of State, Environment, Climate Change, but I was leading the technology portfolio for the government.
Oh, we're going to have some fun with that.
Thanks, Derek. My name is Kian Ming, Dr. Ong Kian Ming. I was a former Deputy Minister at the Ministry of International Trade and Investment in Malaysia, and now I'm currently an adjunct professor at Taylor's University, a private university in Malaysia. Great to be here, and I think both of us have something in common. We're both follically challenged.
Yes, that's true. We're both looking at you with a lot of jealousy.
Yes.
You've got a lovely head of hair.
I'm still too young.
Well, I definitely want to dig into, you guys were both on a panel today, but before we dig into that, I want to take a step back and really understand what brought you into this world. You have both made a fairly significant commitment in your life to government. Shareef, why don't I start with you? What pulled you into government in the first place?
Well, straight out of my studies, A-levels, I joined the first Government Transformation Institute in the Maldives. I was teaching DOS.
MS-DOS.
MS-DOS.
Wow, okay, wow. Okay.
I've heard of this thing.
I was teaching MS.
From a different generation.
That lasted for a few months before I went and started my higher education. But when I came back to Maldives again, I had the opportunity to join the digital government, or what we call the e-government team at the time. And that's how we started. I think our idea was, let us connect these thousands of islands into one digital nation. That kind of vision drove us.
It's interesting because digital is actually where I entered into government as well. It was a bit after MS-DOS, but still we were playing around with new technologies in the Government of Canada, and I was pulled in because of this opportunity to really make an impact on my community, which is quite exciting.
At the federal level, state level?
This was national, so the Government of Canada. And we were playing around with some, we basically created a wiki for government, sort of a wiki for all of government, and then an open source version of Facebook to connect public servants with each other. How about you, Dr. Ong? How did you get involved in all this?
I joined politics in 2013. I was elected as a member of parliament in 2013. And one of the reasons why I wanted to join politics was to bring in more substantive policy discourse. And one of the influencing factors for that was I actually studied and grew up in Singapore. I did my O-levels and A-levels here in a school called Raffles Institution and Raffles Junior College. And I saw a lot of the good things that the Singapore government was doing. And I thought that part of that could be also customized to the Malaysian context. That was one of the reasons why eventually I went back to Malaysia after doing a few things to try to serve the people of Malaysia in a more policy-oriented capacity as a member of parliament and then later as a member of government.
So before we dig in, one more question before we dig into today. You've both been in the field of government now for a period of time. What would you say are some of the key lessons that you've learned from that time?
Well, definitely one lesson I learned was that digital government is not about digital. This is the biggest lesson. I started my career thinking this is about infrastructure. This is about putting the submarine cables. This is about setting up the data centers. I learned this is about building trust, building relationships. It is all about people, both within the government and with the citizen we served. So this is the transformation. As a government, you have to first transform this mindset.
Yeah.
Then digital will just solve itself.
It's interesting. So I've been in a space now working in digital government for about 10, 15 years, and you definitely see the evolution of this. And when I first joined in, it was very much about the technology, the tools, just getting government to use these things. And now it's a completely different conversation. Like you said, it's moved tools away from tools to mindsets and culture and trust. This whole idea of trust, which is something you talked about today on the stage as well. Dr. Ong, how about you? What have you learned since 2013? It's been 13 years?
Yeah.
2026?
Yeah. Similar to what Shareef has experienced, I would say three things in my life as in government and politics. One is it's all about managing people at different levels. Whether it is managing your voters, managing people in government, managing the different colleagues that you have to work with in the political sphere. I think that's one. Second, it's actually trying to understand systems. Systems and structures matter because that's where you give your inputs and that's where you hope to implement some of the ideas and some of the policies that you are interested in. And then the third part would be actually learning about yourself because through that process, you learn about how you can be more effective, you learn about how you can improve yourself, and you learn about how you can work better with others. So, people, systems, and then also self.
I want to actually now transition. So you guys both were part of the opening keynote panel. And Dr. Ong, I want to come to you first because you just mentioned something you talked about on the panel stage as well that I wrote in my notes when I was taking notes today to ask you as follow-up. You talked about this idea of learning about yourself and how important that is in the role of government. Could you sort of explain that a bit more and how you've applied that in your own life?
Yeah, so I think a few things. I think it's very important to have a greater degree of self-awareness as you are going through this role of being in government, being a policy influencer and policy maker, so that you can learn about your strengths and weaknesses. You can learn about how you can be more effective. You can learn about how you can work better with others. You can learn about how to build your own team so that you can become more effective. I think that's where the self-awareness and self-learning becomes very important. And then second thing would be, it's about how you want to project yourself to others, meaning out there in the social media space, for example, because a lot of policy these days is about communicating that to the wider public. So I think when you bring in these kinds of elements, it makes the whole process very interesting and makes life more fun for you and your team, hopefully.
I think why it stood out for me as well is so that the theme of the panel is really like, what does it mean to govern in uncertain times? The times we're in right now are quite chaotic, to say the least. And I know a lot of governments are really struggling with that. And I think the point that you made, which was really interesting, was very much about, like, we were talking about these big, picture stuff. And it's like, no, but you also have to talk about yourself and how you bring yourself into these spaces. Shareef, you had a bunch of stuff that I really wanted to drill into, but what was the key point that you were hoping people got from what you were talking about this morning?
I think one of the key things that I want to actually project during that panel we had was the need to not outsource our thinking, because I feel like as a small island nation, we have a lot of development partners and we depend a lot on them. We have some very well-meaning platform partners as well, service providers, digital innovations, global companies that wants to help us. But what we really should be very careful with, I think, is that we don't totally outsource our thinking to them, because then we outsource our learning to them. And when we do that, we are not just building systems, we are building dependency. And in an uncertain future, where we have to plan for things we do not know, I think we have to internalize our own thinking and make it a priority. Have good braking systems. If you can actually brake well, you can go fast.
I just want to add on to that, what Shareef said about cognitive sovereignty is very important. And, I used to work for a management consulting firm called the Boston Consulting Group. And I know that many governments do work with consultancies to try to enhance their own ideas, to get inputs from different points of view. And I think that's important. But what Shareef said about making sure that the core intellectual property and the capabilities is maintained within the government, that's something that we should not let go of. Whether it is to consultancies or governments from other countries or companies from other countries, this is something that we should be aware of and be mindful in terms of how we manage that.
I think it was actually a really helpful reframe for me, because digital sovereignty in particular has been something I've been thinking a lot about. I mean, being from Canada, it is a hot topic. Realizing how dependent we are on some major companies and organizations that provide our tech stacks that we depend upon, and how those companies are becoming increasingly political. It really puts a lot of countries in a bind, and the challenge is that there isn't an easy solution, because the cost, the expertise that's required to build your own version of this tech stack is really beyond most countries to be able to step into that. So what do? How do you manage that? So this idea of like, okay, but sovereignty means different things. And this idea of intellectual sovereignty and, internalizing the learning, I think is something that has been, for me, a helpful reframe. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to build our own tech stacks.
Yeah.
We can try to learn from others and then customize it based on our own needs, which is what Shareef talked about during the panel discussion as well.
Absolutely.
So this idea that if you take, for example, what Germany is doing with the sovereign fund, instead of investing it in proprietary technology for Germany, it's actually investing it in open source technology.
Yes.
So this is the idea.
I love this idea of open source, and I'm quite excited to see it become more common as a way of countries working together and sharing. Dr. Ong, when I wrote notes, there's basically one word I just wrote over and over again in your talk, which is empathy. You brought it up, I think, like 10 times at least. Why do you think empathy is so important for this moment?
I think in this day and age where people are looking for authenticity among policymakers and decision makers and politicians, authenticity in a good way, this is where we really can embrace that and use that to form better public policies, and then to use those public policies in terms of communicating those public policies to a larger public so that we can really create this virtuous ecosystem where trust can be built and people who are responding to government policies can feel a certain sense of assurance that this will be implemented for their well-being, not just in the short term, but also in the long term.
Shareef, you made a point as well that I wanted to follow up with you on. I think it's one of the last points that you made in the talk, where you're talking about the importance of, you have to be able to deliver for people now, in the moment, but also this need for wisdom for the future. And I guess the question I had for you is, that sounds amazing and beautiful and poetic even. What does that mean?
It is definitely harder done than said, right? But what I believe is with digital government, there is this rush to do things faster. So we measure our KPIs on how quickly we can deliver something. And in this rush to actually deliver faster, our institutional focus has been very much on motion. And what I've noticed, especially in Maldives, and I'm sure this is quite common across digitization, early stage or mid-stage digitalization nations, that we are actually letting go of a key function in government, the function of long-term planning. Now, I said that long-term planning has no place in today's world. But where does the wisdom live in a government? If a government can actually have a functional role of stepping back while we are digitizing, going for speed, if there is a place where people can sit back, humans can sit back, and AI is beautiful at generating answers. And as a government, we want to concentrate on that. But we don't want to give AI the opportunity to ask the questions. We should be asking the questions. So this trust that we want to build, right, comes from having this function of people who are not there for speed, but who are there to think about what we are doing, to take ownership of our thought, so that we know that even as AI delivers fast answers to our citizens, the questions and the way we frame the questions for AI is done by humans. And having these questions being framed by this group of people in partnership, in other words, the governing and the governed partner to frame the questions for technology to answer for us. That is how you build the trust. Not by saying, okay, here we have a group of human wisdom and we will frame the questions and the AI will give you the answers and your life's going to be better. But rather we'd say, partner with us to use AI and emerging technologies, and we take control of our thinking and let it do the work for us.
It's like slow cooking over a dinner table, over a longer period of time.
Very good analogy, yes.
I like that, although I have to say that is also really scary.
Not easy, yeah, definitely.
No, it's not. And particularly because of the complexity of people and the messiness of people. Although I am intrigued, because one of the other things you said is that the uniqueness the Maldives has as being a small community that allows you to take on, be more agile and experiment in ways that bigger countries like Canada and other countries are having a harder time with. So I'm really curious to see what happens next in the Maldives. I'll be paying attention to this. As we wrap up, I guess the good place to end is what do you hope, if there's one thing that you hope people take away from your talks, from this interview here today, what is the key thing that you hope people take?
I would like to see governments starting to take seriously the investment in people. And we see this here, we are hearing this, especially here in Singapore. Minister today, during the opening, he talked about it, investing in people, because that is where everything really happens. Technology will come because the markets are driving that anyway.
Interesting. Okay, one quick follow-up question on that. Great. How do you do that when you have budget cuts? because most governments are shrinking, most governments are trying to find places that cut cost. And the temptation that I see, it's so tempting to be like, well, training, it's nice to have. How do you keep that central in your government when there's such pressure to find cuts?
So this is where regional blocks come into play, I think. Definitely ASEAN. Today, His Excellency had a brilliant point about it. And then I think he didn't mention this in the panel, but during our discussions, I understood that a very small fraction of the actual cost goes into capacity building, because the partnerships you build across globally to invest in people, because ultimately if you invest in people, it drives the economic engine, which drives the technological development. So this cycle, rather than just investing in technology, but investing in people and making sure that diversity of people live through the technological revolution, is definitely the way to go. If you have resource constraints, and everyone does, even the rich countries have resource constraints. So we are not unique as small islands. Everyone has their troubles. But to cut through those troubles in an uncertain world, depend on people, build people, and not just people within government, your nation as a whole.
No pressure.
There's a lot of knowledge, technologies that are out there. But I think from the perspective of public policy, there's a saying that goes, people don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think if, let's say, you can channel your care for the genuine welfare of the people into thinking about public policies, knowledge, technologies, that I think can be translated into long-term good that will be good not just for your own country, but hopefully for your neighbors as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you both for making time for speaking on stage, but also time for this interview here. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to see what comes over the next couple of days.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Derek, and good luck with your adventure this year.
Thank you. Thank you
We
so
will
much.
be following it.
I appreciate that.
And then see you in KL.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Thank you so much.